considering canceling Saturday's games for college football as well. You know that New York's primary canceled, and we don't have a timetable yet for when that may actually occur. I mentioned Major League Baseball Fashion Week here in New York. We had a crew at Bryant Park. Amy Stone, her photographer, were there, then headed down to the scene. Fashion Week has been called off. No information yet on when that may return. The Broadway theaters are dark tonight. We do not have word yet on when they will be back in business. And even a Madonna concert in Los Angeles at the Staples Center, because of security concerns, was canceled tonight. Universal theme parks also closed. We've been showing you video all day, by the way, of Walt Disney World in Florida also being evacuated. Also, I want to point out that Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense, actually predicted there would be a second attack today. After the World Trade Center was attacked, there was an emergency meeting in the Pentagon. Rumsfeld is quoted as saying that there will be another event. I want to emphasize again, there will be another event. Shortly after that, the Pentagon was struck. We also have word, though, it seems rather unique for a place that houses some 24,000 employees, that we only have reports so far of about 100 victims either injured or killed in the Pentagon. That apparently is because the section of the Pentagon that was hit by the plane, apparently forced down by terrorists, was under renovation, and few people were actually in that part of the building, fortunately. Again, they're also saying at the Pentagon they are functioning normally, though they have taken a real hit. And I also want to point out, Dana mentioned a few moments ago that Barbara Olson, the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Theodore Olson, was on one of the planes, actually the plane that hit the Pentagon, and called in beforehand. Also, while this name may not be familiar to you, David Angel, a Hollywood Reporter, is reporting, the creator of Frasier and Cheers, as well as his wife, were on one of the planes that went down. Ernie, Angela?
Todd.
Well, earlier we heard from the senior senator from New York, Senator Chuck Schumer. Right now we want to hear a little bit from the junior senator, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Our country not only has to retaliate directly against those who perpetrated this attack, but we have to make it very clear that we cannot permit any state, any government, any institution or individual to pursue terrorist aims that are directed at the United States or any country with impunity. So I'm hoping that this is the kind of dramatic, terrible catastrophe that unites the entire civilized world, so that it's not just an attack on the United States, it's an attack on everyone who cares about, freedom and dignity and justice and humanity.
All right, Senator Hillary Clinton commenting tonight on the situation, of course, all day, and we are expecting to hear from the president a short time from now. Right now, we're going to go to Chelsea Piers. Paul Moniz is standing by for an update from that vantage point. Paul.
We are now at Pier 61, which most people know as Sky Rink. You can see the situation behind me. There are lines of rescue vehicles and doctors waiting for potential patients to arrive. There is an emergency room here, operating rooms. Right now, no patients. That as many as 400 or 500 injured people could be coming here. Now, a short time ago, we shot some videotape. We want to show you what that looks like. What you may be seeing now is streams of rescue vehicles from all over our area, from New Jersey, from Westchester County, from Shelter Island, even Pennsylvania. We also spotted a Salvation Army vehicle from as far away as Providence, Rhode Island. Right now, this triage center does not have any patients, we believe, because some of the patients that were expected to come here have been treated at triage centers south of here, although the triage center here is expecting an overflow, and as we say, we've been waiting for as many as 400 or 500 people to arrive. They are set up with doctors and nurses ready to take in patients. Now, if we come back here, we can tell you that there is some conflicting information about what's happened to these patients, whether they will be brought here and when they will be brought here. But what we know is that this is a situation at Chelsea Piers where they are ready to take in patients, and obviously this is going to be a long rescue effort. We just heard over the scanner that 2 police officers have been found alive in the rubble. Again, we repeat, 2 police officers found alive in the rubble. We do not know the nature of their injuries nor where they are. Of course, we'll be telling you more about that as soon as we get the information. But there is sign of life out there. That is good news. This will be a long rescue effort, and for the next several days, unfortunately, we will be reporting, I would imagine, some gruesome details details about deaths. So we do not know how many people have died so far. Right now, there are more than 600 injured. Now, I want to pick up on another thing that Pablo was mentioning. Of course, type O and type O negative blood is still needed. That's an important point. Earlier today, the hospitals could not take any more people because they did not have enough people to take the blood. In one case at Bellevue Hospital, they actually ran out of the donor bags. They are telling people to show up tomorrow morning, and it does not matter if you have a donor card. If you do not have one, you can still give blood as long as you fill out a questionnaire. That is an important point because they may need your blood. Again, we are outside the triage center here at Chelsea Piers waiting for patients to arrive. As soon as we learn more, we will share it with you. Paul Moniz, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. We'll check back in with you later.
All right. If you're a parent, well, you're probably being asked some very tough questions tonight about what has happened. I'm sure you get some of those questions tomorrow as well. Joining us now with some advice on how to answer those questions and how to help your children through this very difficult situation is child psychologist Dr. Larry Balder, who's joining us. Larry, we've known each other for a long time. You've been on our air many times. This is a difficult situation for adults, let alone for the little ones, for children. At what age do these young people understand, realize that something has happened?
Well, you know, there's several ways kids know about things. One is just reacting to their parents' mood. So even the smallest children know something's up. They may not know what exactly has happened, but they see there's tension in the air. Certainly by school age, they know what happened. First of all, their schedules have been changed, and they've heard what's been going on from somebody or other, rumor or otherwise. So they know by school age.
So what do parents need to do to assuage their children's concerns?
Well, there are a number of steps that can be taken, actually. One is that you want to avoid trying to make light of it and say, for example, well, don't, you know, what I'm telling you is don't lie. Because parents have a tendency of trying to reassure their kids by covering things over.
When you say don't lie, how much do you tell them?
This you have to gauge based on the age of your child and what your child knows. And you can find out what your child knows and then respond to that. But to try to minimize it, when they know something's up, then they know something really is up. And they think you're hiding something which is very scary to them.
Now, children are used to spending a lot of time, I know I was as a kid, in front of the TV. We're on 24/7 now, giving information out. Should a parent push back and say, you know what, today you're not going to watch TV. Let's talk, let's have family time. We need to talk about something very serious that happened.
Yeah, there's several things you want to do. One is you want to reassure your kids by letting them know what's happening. For example, you tell them how they're going to be safe. The president, the governor, the mayor, the people in charge are doing everything they can to find out who's behind this, and they're doing everything they can to help the victims. Then, I would say, and going along with what you're saying, keep them away from the TV. There's no reason for kids to see these horrific sights. These are really scary, awful. I saw this morning from where I live.
So limit their face in front of that television screen.
This is devastating material.
So much of this is emotional, of course, for all of us. And how much do you share your feelings with your child?
You know, you always want to protect them by hiding your feelings, but I don't think it's a good idea. I think you need to let your kids know if you're upset, if you're nervous, you have anxiety, you're feeling depressed, jittery, you got to tell your kids that's how you're feeling, because if they're looking at you and they know something's wrong, and you're saying to them, oh, I'm fine, nothing's the matter, then I think you give them kind of a peculiar message which is very upsetting to them, very odd for them to hear.
If a parent feels he or she can't handle this situation alone, should they then talk to a therapist or the minister, or what next step should they take?
By all means. And I think most of the schools will have school psychologists and counselors in place to have wrapped discussion groups with the kids, with the teachers. You know, everybody's suffering under the stress of this, and they need mental health experts to help them, and I think that's what parents should turn to.
You talked about the individuality of the child, how much you would tell them based on what you know about your child and their age level. Talk for a moment about the signs that you should look for if your child is really having a tough time. What do you look for?
Well, kids will get clingy. They'll, not want to separate from you, for example. Kids will have nightmares. Kids will have other kinds of symptoms like not wanting to eat, not wanting to separate from you, not wanting to go to sleep, crying.
Not wanting to go to school, maybe.
Now, they may not want to go to school. There's something else you'll hear from them. Someone around here just told me before I came on the air that...
we hate to interrupt. The president is speaking now.
Yes, right now. President George Bush, right now, live from Washington. Let's pick up on his comments tonight. Much awaited information. I certainly hope we'll hear that right now.
Yes, he is, I'm sure, about to start talking. He's probably just getting the last bit of briefing there. There's the president.
I think he is ready to speak right now. President Bush.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
President Bush speaking live from the Oval Office in the White House. Perhaps ominously, among the things the President said was, and this is not a direct quote, but it's on the money, we will not differentiate between those who committed these acts today and those who harbored them. The President vowed that no act of terror will darken America's beacon of freedom. We go now to CBS News Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts. John?
Dan, important words for the president to say that we will not differentiate between the terrorists who committed this act and those who harbor them. If this was, in fact, Osama bin Laden's group who was behind this, that message is aimed directly at the Taliban government. Though we should point out, Dan, that every indication we get from the White House tonight is that the explosions that we saw in Kabul tonight were not part of any American action. The White House has absolutely disavowed any connection to those, as has the Defense Department. The president also sending out some important words of reassurance tonight to Americans, saying that the government is still in operation, essential personnel will be back at work later on tonight, and that the government will be open for business tomorrow. And even though the stock market will be closed tomorrow, Dan, the president reassuring Americans, saying that the American economy will be open for business. The big message here tonight that the president was trying to send out was the idea that they can hit us, but they can't knock us down. He said that we have stared enemies in the face before, we have stared them down, and we will do this again. So the president, Dan, tonight using every ounce of resolve that he can muster to say the United States will recover from this enormous tragedy. Dan?
John Roberts at the White House. Now, U.S. officials are starting to piece together the case of what happened today, and in some instances they're piecing together what they see as links to Osama bin Laden. For being responsible for the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history. That Orrin Hatch, the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee tonight, said they, meaning intelligence operations, they have an intercept of some information that included people associated with bin Laden who acknowledged a couple of targets were hit. That's a direct quote from Senator Hatch. He went on to say that law enforcement has data possibly linking one person on one of the 4 ill-fated flights to bin Laden's organization. Now, government and industry officials say at least one flight attendant and 2 passengers called from 3 of the planes as they were being forced down in New York and Washington, each describing similar circumstances. The callers indicated the hijackers were, at least in the beginning, armed with knives. This day's horrific events began with the familiar turbine whine of jet engines over New York. But this Boeing 767 was too low and not in the regular flight pattern. It was aimed straight for the massive twin towers of the World Trade Center. It hit it. CBS's Byron Pitts is on the scene tonight. Byron?
Well, Dan, a few moments ago, a producer for 60 Minutes just walked back from the crime scene and said she counted only 4 floors left. 4 stories left of one of the 110-story towers. At this hour, rescue teams are still waiting, still hoping, still praying they will find survivors alive. Without exaggeration, Ground Zero looks like a battlefield. 8:48 a.m., mayhem in Manhattan.
We saw a plane coming very low, and everyone said, wow, that plane is very, very low.
Come on, guys, keep moving.
I was walking to work, and all of a sudden, I see a jet crash into the first tower.
An American Airlines flight loaded with 92 people crashes head-on into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
And then we heard the crash, we ran to the window.
Into the building, it went into the Trade Center.
We said it hit the Trade Center, we saw the shrapnel fall, and then we said, get out.
And minutes later.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh, my God. Another plane has just hit.
I heard a roar, and I looked around thinking that it had to be a helicopter, and I looked up, and I saw the second plane hit.
What the hell was that? A second commercial plane, a United Airlines jet, also hijacked, carrying 65 people, plows into the South Tower.
First one we thought was an accident. When we heard there was a second one, we definitely thought it was terrorism.
On the ground, witnesses could not believe their eyes.
Oh, they jumped it!
70 stories up with the building burning, reason gave way to desperation. New York's bravest never had a chance.
We really never even got to that close to the building. An explosion blew and it knocked everybody over.
Less than an hour later, the South Tower came crumbling down.
It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
But it was far from over.
Tower 2 collapsed into Tower 1. Within minutes after that, we were ordered out.
When the dust settled, signs of life started to emerge.
Chaos. It's just chaos out here, it really is. So the Twin Towers fall. It's amazing. It's crazy. I can't believe this shit is happening. I really can't. It's nightmares. Armageddon right here.
This was the worst act of terrorism on U.S. soil, but not the first attack on the World Trade Center. 8 years ago, terrorists set off bombs in the basement in an effort to take down the two towers. They failed. Today, mission accomplished.
I tell you what, it's a sad day for America. It really is.
By 2 o'clock this afternoon, firefighters and police officers and paramedics by the hundreds stood by, many of them feeling helpless. There was nothing they could do at this point because the building was still unsecured.
Our main priority is to get in, do a search and rescue, look for survivors, and then clean up what's left. And we can't do that until the building is deemed safe.
Ankle deep in debris and despair, rescue workers waited. Some had relatives of their own inside. One police officer told me her sister worked here on the 40th floor, due in at 9 a.m. She was always early, she said. Always. A sign on a paramedic's van spoke volumes.
We know we have some of the major brass of our department missing. We're trying to find them too.
New York Port Authority Police Chief William Hall choked back tears. For him, this was no longer just work. On a personal level, because I know that these are all your men and it's a business, but I'm sure that a lot of these guys are your friends. How you holding up?
It's not a business now, it's personal now.
Sir?
It's personal now. We have to get them.
Back live, we have had little relief here. Take a look at this. Hours ago, World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed. A 42-story building that crumbled hours after the initial devastation. It was the one calamity here that was not a surprise. Police had evacuated the area earlier, fearful building number 7 would indeed fall down. Minutes after the second tower collapsed, we met a firefighter named Tim McGee, a New York City firefighter. He was covered in soot from the top of his helmet to the bottom of his feet. He was crying. He told me that he had lost all of his men when the building collapsed. He asked us to reach his wife, Maria, tell her that he was okay, that he had survived. Quote, tell her, I love her. Dan.
Byron Pitts in Lower Manhattan. Mind you that the World Trade Center complex has 7 buildings. So the Twin Towers went down, they're the big ones, but then the 47-story World Trade Center building number 7 collapsed. That was near the end of Byron Pitts' report. Now, building 5 in the World Trade Center complex was for many hours today described as on the brink of collapse. The state of that building at this hour is uncertain. It was long ago evacuated completely. Now about today's other terror strike at the seat and symbol of U.S. military might.
All right, we're going to continue with coverage throughout the night as we follow events with CBS News and Dan Rather. It has now been 12 hours since this whole ordeal started, an incredible 12 hours since about 9 o'clock this morning. An attack on the United States, an attack here in New York City, also in Washington and in Pittsburgh. There are many developments. This story is still very fluid, and we have a number of reporters out on the field. We want to get to them right now.
Indeed. Jennifer McLogan is live at Chase Stadium, where we understand, Jennifer, a series of ambulances have gathered as a meeting place to actually come into the city to help out here.
And not only that, Angela, but floodlight trucks mounted with huge towers are arriving right now, waiting to go into Lower Manhattan to light it up for the rescue squads. They're assembling now at this staging area next to perhaps about 24 ambulances and medics from Long Island, all volunteers right now on standby. Earlier we were at the airport, spoke to you then when LaGuardia and Kennedy were abruptly closed and passengers struggled to stay calm.
This is incredible. People are panicking. People are going crazy, and there's not one cop to maintain. Look at this traffic.
And there is no place in hotel. I have no friends here in this city. I have no place to stay.
And I don't know where we're going right now. You can't get cabs. You can't get cars. You can't get on the phone.
Can't believe this in America yet. Wow. I have a feeling somebody in national security was asleep at the switch. Got a little complacent. The Cold War was over. And guess what? It wasn't.
These people just come in here crazy, and all they want to do is to slaughter Americans. I don't know why Americans allow them to get away with this.
The floodlight trucks that you see now are about to be escorted in by NYPD. All here, a very touching sight, volunteers waiting to help, praying and hoping that our nation will recover. Reporting live right now outside Shea Stadium, Jennifer McLogan, CBS 2.
Jennifer, thank you.
And earlier tonight, we heard here on CBS President Bush speak to the nation. He talked about his priorities. He talked about helping the injured, protecting our citizens, no interruption of services, and business as usual in a sense. New York City is coping with what's going on. Dana Tyler is standing by in the newsroom right now with more information on the hotel situation here and some other things for us. Dana.
Some other things as well, Ernie. Thank you. The hotel situation we heard in Jennifer's story, the young girl, here by herself. There are very few places to find a hotel room in this city. Hundreds of travelers, commuters also. That's the interesting thing too. There are a lot of people who live here who can't get to their homes, and many hotel rooms reporting no vacancies. Also this evening we talked about business as usual. We just got a news release from the New York State Banking Department, and the banking superintendent Superintendent Elizabeth McCall announcing that the state has declared banking organizations affected by the emergency in the city may close their offices at their discretion. So obviously bank offices down in Lower Manhattan affected by the tragedy, pretty good chance you'll see them closed, but she's also urging those who can stay open in the city, in Manhattan, to stay open, to help New Yorkers, to help tourists get on with their daily doings and having money in their pocket. Also, we've gotten a lot of calls here in the newsroom from people who live in the Queens area who've seen air traffic over John F. Kennedy Airport saying, wait a second, we thought the FAA closed all of the nation's airports today, early today, including Kennedy. That is true. These are not commercial planes you're seeing flying in and out of Kennedy. These are Army Corps of Engineer workers, doctors, investigators, National Guard troops coming in, also coming into Stewart Air Force Base. And as we heard Senator Schumer on the phone saying he was trying to fly in, but he couldn't get in yet until the necessary people here critical to the rescue, critical to the investigation, critical to the health issues, they have first choice at those government seats coming in. I'll send it back to you, Ernie, Angela.
Thank you very much, Dana.
CBS 2 reporter Vince Dementri was in 7 World Trade Center about 45 minutes before it actually collapsed today. I know he was actually talking about what was there or what wasn't there.
Describing it as a war zone.
Yes, as a war zone. And something about he's got great gut instincts as a reporter. Something made him move. And thank God he did, because as I said, sometime later, very short time later, number 7 collapsed. Vince is joining us now in Lower Manhattan. Vince, how are you tonight?
Well, about as good as anybody can be. As I mentioned to you earlier, Ernie and Dana, and I'm sure Angela, by now you know many of the people that are missing in law enforcement and the fire department are friends of mine, and that brings me to what I have to tell you. It is very sad news, and let me qualify it first by what I'm about to say. I don't want anyone to interpret that I'm devaluing in any way any of the civilians who are lost at this point. But I've been told by sources that they believe at this point, right now, they are lost and feared dead are many of the top brass of the New York City Fire Department, at least one of the top brass from the New York City Police Department, and no less than 3 of the top brass from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. That said, there are also hundreds of officers and firemen who are unaccounted for. I'm also told by sources that they are literally going from station house to station house for the fire department, doing a head count, precinct by precinct for the New York City Police Department. I'm also told that military heavy equipment will be brought in, bulldozers, cranes, things of that nature, to go in there as soon as they possibly can. And to bring us back to where we began, as you were talking about, yeah, I was there 45 minutes, and in hindsight, I guess what made me leave was when those windows began popping out, and I mean, they didn't fall, they popped out of 7 World Trade Center. In hindsight, I guess maybe that was the inclination for us to get out. But this is what we saw. Take a look. first saw it and walked up to it, you heard it as you were racing to it, but to see it's another thing. What's the first thing that went through your head just after initially seeing it?
I just wanted to cry, to be honest with you. It's terrible.
We are in an abandoned skyscraper, and quite frankly, I don't even know where I'm at. I see a sign outside that just gives me a reference of Barclay Street. As you can see all around here, the windows have been blown completely out. And as we take a walk towards the front of the building here, you want to take a look outside. If you have never been to war, like I have never been to war, then this is what it looks like. We don't know what that building is. We don't know where this building is, but they're obviously on fire. Maybe there's a chance that they could collapse. I've been on this earth for 37 years. I've never been to a war, but I can only imagine that this is as close as I've ever come.
It's an unbelievable sight. I've never seen something like this, and I'm 20 years on this job. This is the worst I've ever seen it before. It's unbelievable, the devastation. We got burnt cars. We have the top of the World Trade Center toppled onto the street. We have we don't know how many people are missing right now. We don't have that number yet, but I'm sure that there is.
I've heard reports that there are just bodies littering the street.
Well, there's reports of people trapped inside the building, but we haven't gone. We can't go in yet until the fire's under control.
More debris falling from a nearby building, the World Trade Center. We're at West Broadway in Barclay. Very difficult to breathe here, but look around. This must have been ground zero where this thing blew up. Car after car after car, buses, completely obliterated and burned straight down to the steel. Behind me, that gaping hole, that's where one of the two towers stood. It's not there. And as you can see above me, the fire in this adjacent building just continues to rage. It's a surreal environment. It's almost impossible to describe, again, except to make a war correlation. Whoever said somebody declared war on us, it certainly looks like it, doesn't it? That building I was referring to that was on fire, I didn't know at the time what it was. I learned later, and also learned just how lucky myself and my photographer Terrence were. That was 7 World Trade Center. 30 minutes after I got out of there, it collapsed. 30-some stories. I have one other note that I just want to put by. This is probably the darkest day in the history of New York City, if not the history of the United States. But if you're looking for some inspiration, just 10 minutes ago, I wasn't too far from where the Tower Number 1 and Tower Number 2 went down, and I saw a car completely covered with soot. And on that car, somebody wrote, "This won't stop New York." So if you're looking for inspiration, hang your hat on that. Ernie, Angela, back to you.
That is the spirit, indeed,
Yes,
that we've been hearing about. Vince, before you go away, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. You were talking to one of New York's bravest, and they were talking about not being able to go into the buildings to be able to do their work until those fires had been under control. What's the status right now? Are they able to go in there?
No, not at this point. Still smoldering. And it's not just the fires you have to be concerned about. You have to be concerned about the structural integrity of the buildings. You know, I mean, you see the silver building over my shoulder here. 7 World Trade stood next to that. The windows there were completely blown out. We don't know what it's done to the foundation. Again, I mentioned it several hours earlier. You want to rush in and do everything you possibly can to try to bring people out. But at the same token, you don't want to send 2,000-3,000 rescuers in there to have them killed by 1 or 2 more buildings that collapse suddenly.
From the people you've been talking with tonight, what does the next 24 hours, the next 48 hours look like?
Well, the next 24 hours definitely looks like doing their best, consulting with engineers, getting any hot spots out, trying to assess the structural damage to any surrounding buildings. Once that is done, it's deemed safe to go in. They're going to go in with heavy equipment. They're going to go in there with search dogs, cadaver dogs, and they're going to go in there with hands and feet and shovels and picks, and they're going to do everything they can to bring as many people out alive as they possibly can.
Vince, one more question. You may not have any information on this, but the issue was raised earlier in the day since we've been on the air here for so many hours. What have you heard, if anything, about biological entities? There had been that issue raised earlier that perhaps anthrax and the like might have been part of this attack today. What have you heard?
Well, certainly there's a lot of concern of that around here. I haven't heard anything concrete where there is definite I won't even say speculation, definite feeling, if you will, that they believe that some sort of biological terrorism has been used. There's all kinds of speculation as to what has happened here. Was the plane loaded with explosives? Was the plane enough in and of itself to crash in the building to bring those 2 towers down? Because you'll see the video, and you've seen it 100 times. It looked like it was a controlled implosion. It didn't fall over. It looked as if somebody put TNT all throughout that building. It pancaked from floor to floor to floor.
Yes.
So of course there's speculation here that maybe these planes were loaded with C4 explosives or some type of explosives on timers. That if the plane itself didn't bring it down, that charges would go off and that eventually what happened would happen. But as far as biological attacks go, yes, it is a concern. How great of a concern, I don't think at this point.
We'll be learning more about that, I'm sure. A lot of questions, perhaps not the answers that we want right now, but in time, we know we will have those answers. Vince Trementry in Lower Manhattan, thank you for your report. We will get back to you.
Yes, and of course, the hospital personnel at St. Vincent's, they were some of the first people on the scene to actually help with the injured people there. The mayor has been he's just been so happy with the way they have handled themselves and the way they got to the scene so quickly and the work they're doing. Whitney Casey is there live with more for us. Whitney.
That's right. The mayor, the governor, and the police commissioner all here today commendating the efforts of the workers here. Now we're told that it's almost sort of the calm before the second storm. It's very quiet here behind me. It's been like that for the past 2 hours here because they say that they're doing some extensive digging and they hope to bring people back here very shortly, and they say those people may have very serious injuries. Now joining me right now is Mark Ackerman. He's been here with me all day talking to us, keeping us informed about what's going on at the hospital. It's a lull right now, but we've seen this earlier today.
You're absolutely right. We have seen this several times. What Fidney, the fire department, has told us is that occasionally they have to drop back, stop digging because they hit hot spots or there's other problems that arise. They are currently stopped digging at the moment, we're told. My information may not be entirely up to date, but we also need to understand that, or have been led to believe, that they're going to start digging again very soon, and thus we've kept most of our staff here.
Right, about 500 doctors and nurses here.
Yeah, we've cut back just a little bit because what we are now understanding from the fire department is that they believe they will be digging for several days. So we're now going on 12-hour shifts. The Salvation Army has been gracious enough to put up 100 cots right on 14th Street in their facility, and we're sending people to get some sleep now, and we're going on 12.
A little problem with our technology down there. Of course, you can understand. Phones really have been out for most of the day. People haven't been able to use their cell phones or landlines. But nevertheless, we are communicating and getting the information that you need. Speaking of information, Dana Tyler is standing by right now with more on the schedule for tomorrow, what's going to be open, what's going to be closed. It's a long list, Dana. Bring us up to date.
Well, you mentioned the telephones, and earlier today, and it wasn't just in the New York area, it stretched from Maine south to the southeast of the country. I mean, the jam of phone lines was incredibly widespread, and so that has lessened up some, but still you did say, so many people using the phones, pay phones, we've learned, all pay phones are free in Manhattan until this emergency is over. Communication, of course, not only in talking with your loved ones, but just continuing on with life, getting things done. As we've all said throughout the day, all buildings south of Canal evacuated earlier today. Stability of the buildings still crucial. Crews wanting to know that, so obviously those people do not go to work tomorrow. All New York City public schools are closed tomorrow. Principals will be in and some supervisors talking about what curriculum they will do, because this is something our children need to talk about to learn to cope with. This is not go away when we wake up tomorrow. This is something we will all be dealing with for quite some time. Also, all Catholic schools in New York City are closed tomorrow. All Manhattan bridges are open, but outbound only. No bridge crossings in Manhattan currently. The Battery, the Lincoln and Holland tunnels, all completely closed for now. That has been the situation all day. Subway service has been restored. Trains are bypassing stations south of Canal Street. We understand that Long Island Railroad train service has returned to normal. New Jersey trains have limited service out of Manhattan. And again, payphones free for the time being. Ernie, Angela, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dana. We'll get back to you in a while.
Joining us now on the phone is Democratic Congressman Elliot Engel. Are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
Good to have you with us this evening. We also understand you're on the International Relations Committee. What happened today is certainly not going to be good for international relations with some people in parts of this world.
Well, I think today is the day that America lost our innocence. I don't think we'll ever be the same, but I think we need to regroup and rally behind the president and get to the bottom of this, find out who's responsible, and react swiftly and punish those responsible. And also, obviously, there were many lapses, and we need to find out why. And Congress is going to find out why. And I think we need to plug up the holes and the gaps that we have.
There were huge holes and gaps. I mean, aren't you surprised that something of this magnitude could happen to us?
Well, I am surprised. You know, I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. I represent the Bronx and Westchester. This is like a bad dream. I think somehow, perhaps I'll go to sleep and wake up, and then it'll all be a dream. We have a lot of work to do in this country. There are obviously forces that are bent on our destruction, but I think that New Yorkers are a resilient lot, and Americans are a resilient lot, and we're not going to let it to stop us. Congress will be in session tomorrow. We're going to move ahead with government, and we're going to track these people down.
What do you expect will happen tomorrow? We listened to the president tonight, of course, reassuring Americans that strength will prevail. What do you expect will be happening in the next 24 hours?
Well, I think we'll see bringing together of everyone. You know, in times like this, in a crisis like this, politics is not important. Americans have to all bond together, and I think you'll see a coming together of the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans all resolving to work together. You know, our differences are not very important. Our strengths as Americans are, and I think that we're going to have a resolution tomorrow to support the president and to track down the people responsible for this. And then I think that we have some soul searching to do, frankly, because you know, we haven't had a hijacking in the United States in about 2 decades, and suddenly for there to be 4 in one day, this was obviously very planned out and done by a large amount of people, not just by 2 or 3 people. And of course, all fingers seem to point to Osama bin Laden, but we're going to find out who it is.
Well, a lot of people are saying we got caught with our undershorts down, and it's not a very nice thing to say, but that's exactly what it seems like happened, and it's just a mystery as to how it could happen to this magnitude.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. You know, even myself, and you know, I'd like to think I'm on top of these things. We always thought of terrorist attacks being bombs, but no one really ever thought that much about commercial airplanes crashing into skyscrapers. I mean, this is just a nightmare beyond our wildest dreams. And again, I think that this country has lost its innocence today, and this is akin to Pearl Harbor, as Senator Hagel mentioned.
Congressman, in another part of the world, as you know, there's been rocket fire and missiles and explosions going on of Kabul, Afghanistan, and that capital city. There were reports earlier today about a possible U.S. attack there. That was rejected by a top U.S. official. I wanted to know what your thinking was on this situation. That's going on right now.
Well, we're told that this has nothing to do with the United States, but I think one thing the president said was very telling. He said that we will track down those responsible and those countries that harbor them. And obviously, Osama bin Laden is given shelter by the Taliban in Afghanistan, who were among the worst in the world. We had all kinds of resolutions against them when they were making Hindus wear yellow ribbons and other things. And I think that the Taliban leadership, if it does come to pass, that Osama bin Laden bears responsibility as well. And I think that at that point we need to strike and strike hard. And I think, you know, my heart obviously goes out to all the families, because I think that the casualties are going to be in the thousands, and all of us as New Yorkers are going to know somebody or know someone who's lost a loved one. This is just going to play out and be terrible.
Representative Engel, it's amazing to me how this monster, Osama bin Laden, is able to hide from such a superpower like the United States. Your thoughts on that as a member of the International Relations Committee?
Well, I think that his hiding days are going to be over. I think that we will make a concerted effort to, if indeed it's proven that he's responsible for this, as I suspect he is.
What does that mean? Are you suggesting some strong military response here?
Well, I think there will be, and there will have to ultimately be some strong military response, because I think that's the only thing the terrorists understand. They cannot seek refuge, and they cannot disrupt our society, and we won't let them disrupt our society, and we won't let them seek refuge. Yes. And I think that perhaps we have a better feeling today of what the people in Israel have been going through all these many months. And I think terrorism is not confined to any one nation. I think all the nations of the world have to band together to fight.
Well, we certainly have seen that. New York Congressman Eliot Engel, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the phone, and we'll talk to you again perhaps soon.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
CBS 2 reporter Lou Young has been covering the angle from Mayor Giuliani's perspective. We can't say exactly where he is, but Lou is joining us now with an update. Lou.
Yes, with the destruction of 7 World Trade Center, that we saw it collapse on TV late this afternoon. That building housed the city OEM bunker, Office of Emergency Management bunker, that was supposed to be bomb-proof. It was supposed to be the place where the city was going to direct a response to an emergency like this, and it is now in rubble. Early today, it became apparent that they weren't going to be able to use that center, and city commissioners set up another command post at a building not far from where I'm standing at an undisclosed location to begin directing the city's operations. The mayor then had to bounce back and forth between here and St. Vincent's Hospital, and it took them a number of hours to get the usually smooth communications apparatus up and running again, but we understand now that they are now running, and we're beginning to see some evidence that the city is regaining control of this situation. I was over on the east side a short time ago, over at the city morgue, where they have moved a lot of personnel, a lot of people to begin identifying the many bodies that are being brought out of Lower Manhattan. There are refrigerator trucks parked outside the chief medical examiner's office, and a few doors from there, 26th and 1st, at the laboratory for the New York City Department of Health. People who are looking for folks who are believed to have been in those buildings or in the disaster zone and are not accounted for are filling out forms and giving information to city health people, health department personnel, for identifying characteristics, anything that would help either identify a person who is found alive or remains that are found. So a grim task is beginning here. The city is trying to regain control of the situation, and we expect a briefing at the location not far from where I'm standing about 10 o'clock tonight for some more numbers. The casualty numbers now clearly approaching officially the 3,000 mark, with those who were evacuated to Liberty State Park and those who are known to be in hospitals, and of course the people who were killed aboard the 4 planes that crashed. So, or the 2 planes that crashed here in New York. So we're talking about numbers now that are beginning to approach 3,000, and all this is complicated, and the tragedy deepened for the city by the realization, and this is pretty firm, but it is not official yet, that there were perhaps 200 firefighters and as many as 100 New York City police officers who were in the vicinity of those towers when they collapsed. So a lot of people here are dealing with the loss of people they knew, the death of would-be rescuers. One man who left number 1 World Trade Center said he is haunted by the image of all those brave firefighters and police officers rushing past him, going into that burning building. Also haunted by the onlookers who were standing there gaping up in awe at what they were seeing. He moved a couple of blocks away, it came crashing down, and he realized that in an instant, most if not all of those people that he had just seen were dead. So that is the kind of realization we're coming to now. The city beginning to try and deal with the enormity of this situation, and we'll have more for you a little bit later. The mayor is expected to give us an update about 10 o'clock. We're live in Lower Manhattan. Lou Young, CBS 2.
Well, thank you. As the mayor has said, and Cardinal Egan, we need to pray.
Yes, realization and, of course, the job ahead. Speaking of that, Kirsten Cole tells us what's going on right now. Chelsea Piers. Kirsten, come in.
This is actually in emergency standby mode right here at Chelsea Piers. Behind me, this is an area that they have set aside for emergency triage. Specifically, it was going to be created to treat both firefighters and policemen who have been injured while on the job this evening. What you can see behind me is a line of ambulances ambulances that is stretching for blocks and blocks. This is people who are waiting. You talk about the spirit of New Yorkers, the spirit of help that is coming out tonight. It is just phenomenal. You see doctors and nurses walking their way out of Lower Manhattan. The triage teams, the emergency teams are standing by inside Chelsea Piers right now. Doctors and nurses have been walking out. Now, we've also found out that there are 300 emergency medical and mortuary professionals who are being sent to both Washington, D.C. and New York. That is by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. That is going to begin to deal with the inevitable grim realities that we have coming out of this. Now, we did know that all of this was coming. Part of what we do here in the news business is we cover things as we're preparing for them. And over the past few weeks, just a few weeks ago, I was at Long Island College Hospital where they were preparing and going through a drill for a chemical attack, specifically for smallpox. They put their emergency room into full out mode in order to prepare for an emergency. They had their doctors on standby. They went through a drill running through these inevitables. Another thing that was going to happen, Grand Central Terminal this Saturday was going to do an identical drill, preparing for this type of terrorist attack. We have heard so much about this. We have been the victims of these types of attacks before, with the World Trade Center being bombed 8 years ago. This is something that we have feared mightily would be coming, and despite our preparations, we still are never ready for it. As a matter of fact, our viewers are going to remember that CBS 2 did a special report on the fact that our airport security in many places has gaping holes. And that is definitely borne out with 4 U.S. airplanes that have been hijacked. Now, also, I wanted to let you know that this devastation spreads far beyond just the island of Manhattan. I have driven around quite a bit today. I came in from Westchester this morning. And the spirit of the doctors who were trying to get through, the police officers who were working with the doctors so that they could get through the emergency blockades, yet still keep the island of Manhattan locked down and keep the people on this island safe. The same thing in Brooklyn. We saw a tremendous amount of medical professionals trying to get through, emergency personnel at the NYPD trying to keep people in, trying to keep people out. And one of the things that struck me so much, we were at the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, and so much of that debris came floating over this afternoon. You could see not only the incredible amount of ash, but also whole pieces. My photographer and myself, Don Janney, we actually plucked files out of the air from 1995, and we were reading some of these files. And what we also found on these were also human remains floating through the air in addition with those files. And now what we've seen are massive amounts of heavy-duty construction equipment coming in, trying to start dealing with the grim task of getting in here, getting to these victims, getting into these buildings while still trying to keep emergency personnel safe. The last numbers that we had, 250 NYPD unaccounted for, 200 FDNY unaccounted for, and we do know that the death toll is rising somewhere around 3,000. We had 50,000 people that go through those World Trade Centers every day. So there is an incredible possibility for the number of dead to rise. And this is what we are doing here at Chelsea Piers right now. We are waiting, as well as all the other emergency workers, as well as all of the ambulances here, as well as all the doctors and the nurses set up in an emergency triage, waiting for what will come next when they can finally get into those buildings and these emergency workers can start dealing with this level of the task. Reporting from Chelsea Piers, I'm Kirsten Cole. Back to you in the newsroom, Dana and Angela.
Kirsten, thank you so much.
We are seeing so many pictures on that screen. They've been on the air since at least 9 o'clock this morning, a lot of them being repeated, of course. And we have something to show you now, and that is probably, you know, the sight that just can bring tears to your eyes for many people in this city. This is our New York skyline.
Yes.
And those of us who live here and have been part of the city for so many years and love this city
and
are
love
devastated.
that skyline.
You bet. And there's something really missing there tonight, Angela. There's a big black hole right there, and 2 incredible buildings once stood there, 2 buildings that New Yorkers were very proud of, shared so much history, and unfortunately we had a situation back in 1993, the World City Trade City bombing, of course, incident that took place, and no one expected this, of course. Nobody expected what happened today, but this was the site of those 2 twin towers and also that number 7 tower that went down today. A real sad note and a sad sight right there.
Yes. We're going to go now to Dana Tyler. She's in the newsroom. She has some information on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Dana.
Business news and additional closings I have for you, Angela, as it is tomorrow in Tokyo, and we have word from the wire that Tokyo stocks plunged. The dollar was sharply lower against the yen Wednesday as trading began cautiously in Japan just hours after the attacks in New York and in Washington, as well as President Bush again saying our financial institutions remain strong and the American economy will be open for business as well. But there is concern among economists that the attacks will cause consumers who are already, it's been a rough couple of months here, who've been cutting back, that this attack will cause consumers to cut back even further on their spending. And their spending, consumer spending, accounts for 2/3 of the nation's economic activity. Also, Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve Chairman, he was in Switzerland, Basel, Switzerland, in a conference and then on a plane returning to the United States when the attacks happened. His plane was diverted. His next meeting, October 2nd, so we're waiting to hear on that. Also, we've also talked Morgan Stanley, which had 3,500 employees in the two World Trade Center towers. A statement from the Morgan Stanley CEO, Phil Purcell. We just got this. We are all saddened and outraged by the attack on America today and extend our deepest sympathies and prayers to all of the people affected. He goes on to say how his focus, his immediate focus for his company is the concern and well-being and safety of Morgan Stanley employees. Also, he wants consumers, clients of Morgan Stanley, to know that you should rest assured that your assets are safe. If you are concerned about specific positions or operations, you should call your established contacts. And one other thing, earlier today, the FAA doing something the first time in history, closing all of the airports in the country, and Newark International Airport saying, we just got word as of this evening, no timetable yet for reopening the facility, which was completely evacuated for the first time in its history. So many things remained closed, and including a lot of things you need to check what you're doing tomorrow. Courts, court offices in Manhattan, employees should stay home unless they are contacted. The Empire State Building, among many things, that will be closed tomorrow in Manhattan. Ernie, Angela?
Dana, thank you. We'll check back in with you in a little bit.
You know, I'm going back for a moment to that big black hole that we saw tonight. And as we talked about the skyline of New York City, but I think most important, and we've talked about this before, the people who brought life to those buildings, I think are really important. The building didn't bring life to the people. The people who occupied those structures made that entity, and they created the life force in there, and that's what we are going to miss. We're going to miss the skyline, but we're going to miss that loss.
Vibrancy. Oh, yes.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of thing that we mourn tonight. And our prayers go out, obviously, to all of the families. And we sense that as we report this story that is just so highly sensitive. Security has been a key word here today. What's going to happen? What's happening now? And Todd McDermott has been looking into the security issues and a few other things. Todd, bring us up to date.
Ernie, Angela, we want to start with telling you more about what the U.S. Navy and Air Force are doing to secure this country. As you know, all civilian air traffic has been shut down nationwide. Will be shut down until at least noon tomorrow. While that is going on, military aircraft are transporting people to this area to help in the relief and rescue and recovery efforts. At the same time, the Navy has dispatched 2 sets of aircraft carriers along with the ships that go along with them to New York and Washington after today's attack. President Bush vows to find all responsible. In the meantime, Admiral Robert J. Natter, the commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, had sent the ships to help with defense and medical needs, saying we haven't been attacked like this since Pearl Harbor. Those ships include the carriers, the USS John F. Kennedy and Norfolk-based USS George Washington, both of which were headed to New York. An Atlantic Fleet spokesman says each has a crew of up to 3,000 sailors, and the JFK's Air Wing has about 1,500 sailors and airmen. Again, part of the security measure will be aircraft will be on the decks of those carriers and armed to maintain security along the East Coast, especially right here in New York and down towards Washington. Also deployed, amphibious ships, guided missile cruisers, guided missile destroyers capable of responding to threats from the air and the sea are being deployed to protect our coast. Those amphibious ships are carrying Marines and sailors to provide security, surgical teams as well for the medical needs of those injured, and limited hospital bed facilities. Also, the nation's military, as you might imagine, as we've been reporting for hours, is on the highest state of alert right now as the president vows to hunt down those responsible for the attacks. The president, as you know, was in Florida this morning, then taken to a military base, Barksdale, I believe, in Louisiana, before heading to Offutt Air Force Base and Strategic Air Command in Nebraska. The naval installations under the command of NATA, the Atlantic Fleet, are also on the highest security condition. That's 188 ships, more than 1,200 aircraft, 37 shore stations, more than 125 sailors, Marines, and civilian employees. Navy officials are not giving details about security measures in great detail again, but Atlantic Fleet spokesman Mark McDonald says some measures include banning anyone but essential personnel at the naval base, which is the world's largest. Around the country, fighters, airborne radar, refueling planes have been scrambled, according to the